In this episode of the podcast, we talk about what to do in casting if you feel like your life isn't interesting at all. Welcome to the How to Get on Reality TV podcast with Dan Giesling, where I answer your reality TV casting questions once a week. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the How to Get on Reality TV podcast. I'm super excited to be here today as always because we have another interesting question from Damaris, which is all about what to do in casting if you feel like your life is not interesting at all and you don't have any stories to tell. And I'm glad that she asked that question because it probably applies to a lot of people that don't know how to get started or don't know what to do, but they really want to start to put themselves in a position to be cast. But before we get into that, I want to let you guys know that if you're in a position and you don't know what to do next, a great thing to do outside of listening to this podcast is to check out the guide that I wrote, which is a step-by-step guide on how to get cast on reality TV. It takes you from A to Z, everything you need to do in terms of developing your story, how to present your story, how to get yourself camera ready, and everything in between through the casting process. If you want to check that out, you can go to howtogetonrealitytv.net/guide. It's essentially if you wanted me to write a workbook for you with worksheets that are included to help get yourself in a position to be successful in casting. That's the best I've done. It's really good. It's helped a lot of people be successful in casting. You check it out by going to howtogetonrealitytv.net/guide. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this week's question from Damaris, which is all about what to do when you feel like your life's boring and uninteresting.
Hey Dan, this is Damaris and I'm from New York City. I currently want to audition for Big Brother Season 18. The only problem is that I have fear that my life is not interesting. I graduated high school 2 years ago. I'm currently unemployed and I live with my parents. The only story I can tell them is I have morals. I never drunk before. I never smoked. I never been to parties. I never did a lot of stuff kids my age that are 21 does. I just want to know, how can I make them cast someone like me? Make them say, this is the girl I want to see on TV. This is the girl I want. I want to cast this girl. I just want to know that, how can I audition and have my story told out? Thanks, Dan. Bye.
All right, first off, I want to thank you, Damaris, for uploading your question and putting yourself out there, because I'm sure this wasn't an easy question to ask, and you've definitely opened yourself up to a lot of criticism directly from me, but I hope that you take it in the right way, and I think you will, because you want to do something extraordinary with your life. It's not a normal thing or an everyday thing to be cast on reality TV, but everything you're saying is pretty accurate. You said, hey, look, I'm afraid that my life isn't interesting. You said, I believe you used the word fear. And I'm going to tell you this straight. It is. Your life isn't interesting from what you presented in a 60-second question. That's the bad news. The good news is you can change that, and you do need to change it if you want to get cast. And this is going to be more of a philosophical or I hate to say the word motivational, but something that will hopefully propel you to do something about that. Because you're right. If that was your story, you're not going to get cast. If that's the only thing you talk about, the fact that you're unemployed and you live at home and you've never partied or done anything like that, which, is interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. You're not going to get cast. You do see unemployed people that live in their parents' house on the show, but it's because they have a wildly dynamic personality, and there's something else about that person. But I want to take you back, Damaris. I want to take you back to a time when I was first applying for reality TV, and this is something I don't like to do often because it's not about me. But I feel like this show is about you and answering your question. But I feel like you're going to get something from my story and where I started when I was at your age, because I felt the same way. Like I really, I didn't feel like there's anything particularly interesting about my life, and the first time I applied for Survivor and I made it to the second round after, when I talked to the person, Sarah Monson, I believe, she said, hey, you just don't have enough life experience. That's kind of how she worded it. And she was right. I didn't really have anything outside of the fact I was 21 and did some cool things, but really, like, what was that all about? So what I'm talking about specifically is I would start to do things in my life because I knew my life wasn't interesting enough to get cast on reality TV. I would start to do things just for the sake of having something to talk about in very unique in the casting situation. Let me give you an example. When I was in college, my roommate was running a marathon, and there was a week until the marathon. He's like, "Hey, do you want to run a marathon?" And of course, I don't want to run a marathon. There was no desire for me to do it. I wasn't like, "Oh, I can't wait to run a marathon." But what crossed my mind is, if I do this, is this something interesting to talk about in casting? And while you shouldn't develop your entire life around things you can talk about in casting, if you're serious about it, when opportunities like that to come up, you should probably do it, because whether or not you want to do it, it's going to be an interesting story. And of course, I did run the marathon. I ran it untrained, and I finished, and it went well. But I could talk about that for 30 minutes in a casting situation because it was unique, and it's something that probably they didn't hear very often. I'm sure they heard people running marathons, but they never heard people running them untrained with a week's notice. And it's important to note that I didn't want to run that, but I ran it for the purpose of, that's one feather in my cap that I can talk about something unique. It's not going to be a main part of my storyline, but it's something to say, hey, tell us something crazy you've done, or hey, tell us how competitive you are. Boom, there's a story right there that's real. And, so you need to start developing your life and pushing yourself in a way that you can talk about those things. And the only way that you're going to have those stories to talk about is by being active and doing things like that. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to start pushing yourself, because not only is that going to give you stories to talk about, it's going to build some confidence for you. I could tell from the message you left, you sound like you really want this, but it sounds like you're not going to be successful at it because you don't have a lot of ammunition behind you or a lot of things behind you to talk about. So let's talk about what we do know about you. We do know that you're unemployed, you live with your parents, and that you're, I use the term good kid, meaning not that you're a bad kid if you party and stuff like that, but just that you haven't done those things. So I would ask why. Why haven't you done those things? And I think that's a part of your storyline, but I think outside of that, you have a long way to go. Are you going to get a job? Why haven't you had a job? Maybe your story becomes how you were able to land a dream job by doing outlandish things. And I don't know, but you got to start putting yourself in a position to do different things so that you can talk about them. A couple examples, like maybe you really love pets and all of a sudden you start volunteering at a local pet shelter. And then all of a sudden that's a major part of your casting story. Here's Damaris. She's an animal lover, and she spends half of her free time helping at local animal shelters. And all of a sudden, you're cast on the show, and then all of a sudden there's someone who hates pets on the show, and boom, there's a part of your story that's going to connect with someone else in an inverse way, all because you're doing things that you like or that you may be interested in. But I would encourage yourself to do as many things as possible that is going to give you stories to tell. You have to do interesting things to give yourself interesting things to talk about. And if you stay the status quo, and if you stay unemployed, and if you stay living in your parents' house, which isn't necessarily part of that, but nothing's going to change in your life, so nothing's going to change for you in casting. I think the fact that, one tip I'd give you, the fact that you're in New York, whether you realize it or not, you have a New York accent. I think you should do New York-centric things. Do things that are unique that you can only do maybe in your borough, and start to develop that as part of your story. Hey, I'm the girl from X borough. Whether it's Queens, Brooklyn, wherever. I don't know what it is, but that could help your story. But you got to start doing things. And I would encourage you to apply this season to get a feel and see the feedback you get, but that's most likely going to be the feedback you're going to get, is you don't have enough life experience, or you're not going to hear anything at all, because there's really nothing interesting or different about your life, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to live like, in that sort of life, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're trying to do something extraordinary, you got to start doing extraordinary things. And, that's my best advice to you, is to start doing things, start volunteering, start putting yourself in extraordinary situations, start doing New York-centric things, because, I don't know how many people apply for the show from New York City, but you can make that unique spin. You're the New Yorker that has X. You're the New Yorker that does Y. Or the New Yorker that loves animals. Whatever it is, that's going to be an interesting slant that, may help you get cast on the show. So I really want to answer this question because I know there's a lot of people that feel the same way, and it's not just you, Damaris. And I hope you take this as dude, this is Dan's trying to help me, which I am. But there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that don't feel like they don't have anything interesting to talk about. And when they go to write their weird list, their 10 things that's unique about them, it's all things that are very average. And so the only way that's going to change is to put yourself in positions where you're not being average. Do stuff that's crazy. I'm not saying jump off, a bridge with the bungee cord, because that's kind of stereotypical, but do things that you would feel, hey, do I want to do this? Yeah, maybe. Hey, is this going to help me, tell a great casting story? Yeah, then do it. If it's something you really want, which I'm guessing if you're taking the time to submit a question on the podcast, or you're listening to podcasts, I would do it. So Damaris, I hope this helps you, and I hope this helps anyone else that's in the same position as you, because Damaris, you're not the only person. And I was in your position once too. So I hope this helps. If you're, just take action, and in a year, send a follow-up question and let me know all the things you've done that are crazy and different that build your casting story, because I think it'll be interesting to check in with you in a year. But Damaris, thank you so much for submitting your question. As a small thank you, we're going to send you a free digital copy of my story, How a Normal Guy Got Cast on Reality TV. And if you want your question answered on the podcast, just like Damaris, go to howtogetonrealitytv.net/ask. You can do it from your web browser, record from your laptop. You can do it from your phone. You can do it from your tablet. It's really easy to submit a question, have your question answered. And the more specific you can get, the better. If you want to share part of your casting story and have me, tweak it or help you with it, please do that. The more specific the question, it's always better. So Damaris, thank you so much. Best of luck, and thank you for submitting the question. All right, so that wraps up another episode of the How to Get on Reality TV podcast. And I can't stress enough, for normal people that are cast on the show, it rarely just happens for them. People have to do things that are extraordinary, put themselves in different situations to be able to tell interesting casting stories, to be able to put interesting things on their weird list. So when those opportunities arise, or if they don't arise, go seek them out. And I feel like this is kind of a question that hits close to home for me, because I was in Damaris's position myself. And so I started to do things. And when you do those things, it also keeps why you're doing them in the forefront of your mind. So you're thinking about all the time, or more often than not, what can you do to boost your casting story? And if you're looking to also boost your chance of success and you need some help taking your story to the next level, or start the basis of your story, I'd encourage you to check out the guide that I wrote, which is the complete step-by-step guide to getting cast on reality TV. You can check it out by going to howtogetonrealitytv.net/guide. It comes with worksheets. It's essentially a classroom guide with worksheets and everything you need to know to get your story started and get yourself on track to get cast on reality TV. So you can check that out by going to howtogetonrealitytv.net/guide. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you guys next Monday for a special episode of the How to Get on Reality TV podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and being a part of the show. I'll see you guys next time.